Hello, my name is Aaron Tevebaugh, and I'm currently serving as a Senior Director of Talent Development for Johnstone Supply's Grimmie Group. I've spent the last 14 years studying human behavior and assisting others in developing their communication, conflict resolution, and overall people skills. I'm excited to share my experience with you at the 2025 ESCO National HVACR Education Conference, where I'll be presenting on how to build a people-focused culture. I'll be covering areas such as our need as individuals to have a better understanding of both ourselves and others, and how that helps us to have effective interactions, both at work and home. In addition to that, we have certain areas that you can offer your students and staff to help them have a more balanced development plan overall. In addition, I'll have practical tools and strategies that you can take back to your everyday lives to help you set your individuals up for success in their interactions with other people, both in their home and work environment. So we look forward to seeing you in sunny Las Vegas on Tuesday, March 18th at 4 o'clock. We'll be presenting in the Sonoma C room. See you then.
Well, hello everyone. Thank you for joining us once again on Did You Know, the ESCO HVAC show. I know that intro was a little dated, but it was one that we were doing to highlight Aaron's class at the conference, and it was so well received. I had to get Aaron on the show and dive a little bit deeper because it's a perspective that many of us don't always think about, right? You know, as educators, most of us, like myself, came from the field, from the service or installation side of the industry. We get to a point where we're ready to give back, and so we get into education. And so we're really good at delivering technical skills and technical training. But really what we do when we move into education is we become educators of minds, not just technical, but that whole developmental side of adolescent growth. And it's a different perspective for many of us when we get there and we go, okay, I gotta learn how to teach, and then I gotta learn how to talk to different groups, different generations, and different ages, and it's not always an easy thing. Kendrick, thank you for joining us today. Kendrick, I think you'll appreciate this. This is just a really cool perspective on people and working with people, and I'm grateful that you keep joining us. Tom, yeah, glad that you're hanging out with us here. Yeah, I know a lot of us really enjoyed this class at the conference. I was talking to Eugene yesterday, and he's like, oh, Aaron's going to be on the show? I'm like, yeah. He says, oh, that's great. I can't wait to hear that. So Aaron, like so many people in our industry, adopted us. Aaron came into our industry from a different background of working with people, and now spends a lot of time developing people both at Johnstone Supply, the Grimmie Group, which is actually where I came from in the educational side. But he spends a lot of time working with a lot of people internally, helping them develop. Tom Tebby, glad that you're joining us, sir. Boy, this is you. This whole class is right up your alley. I think you're really going to appreciate this one. And everyone, let us know where you're joining. I'm very fortunate enough to know Aaron personally. Aaron is right here in the same central Indiana area as I am. So we actually get to hang out and spend time over at Johnstone periodically. And so Aaron, tell us a little bit about your background before we dive into the topic for today.
Yeah, so I left high school back in 1995, and I thought I was going to be a robot engineer. But what I didn't understand was I wasn't wired for that type of work.
Oh,
so I went off to college, and my very first class that I took in the tech world was fundamentals of digital principles for electronics.
okay.
I failed that class, but the same semester I aced psychology and government. And as an 18-year-old kid, I didn't know why.
Okay.
And what I learned much later in life is that I'm wired not to be a slow, methodical type of worker, but I'm wired to move faster. And so that's what ended up leading me into a policing career, which I spent 21 years at the Indianapolis Metropolitan Police Department. Retired there a little over 3 years ago as a detective sergeant. But a couple years before I retired, I got to spend 7 years in the training academy, basically studying human behavior. Because
Mm,
if you do the math there, we're talking about, I was in the training academy 2011, 2018. We all saw what happened in policing back in about 2019 and
yeah, it's
2021.
kind of crazy, wasn't it?
But about 2015, I was fortunate enough to work with a lot of really sharp people, and we would get together and talk about where we saw things going. And we
Hmm.
were doing a lot of work and a lot of preventative work, if you will, trying to make sure that we had a really good relationship with the community. We were teaching our officers to see people as people, mitigate conflict, understand all of the mental health issues that were out there and
Sure.
implicit biases and those types of things. And so you'll notice when the country kind of fell apart, if you will, during those times, there was very little issues in Indianapolis at that time.
That is true. That's a great point. I hadn't really thought about that. And it's so funny when you mentioned that. I think that was one of the things that I was most intrigued when I met you is that you're very high energy, and I'm like, oh yeah, yeah. This guy's on like work crack, just like I am. Right?
Yes.
This guy's a workhorse. There's no doubt
Yeah.
about it. And so it's definitely helped groom our relationship. And
Oh
so
yeah.
what you give back to the industry is just so passionate, right? And so many of us educators we're very passionate about the technical side, but that whole communication and
Mhm.
understanding people, man, that was a learned thing for me. And we get
Sure.
a lot of
Mhm.
questions and comments from educators of, man, it's not easy working
Yes.
with especially kids, especially could be troubled kids. I may not know their backgrounds. I'll be diverse. I mean,
Yeah.
there's so many different obstacles in the classroom, and so trying to understand those and trying to learn how to communicate is a skill on its own. I always say when
Mhm.
we come to the classroom, it's not that we're putting down the tools that we know, we're just picking up some new tools that's going to be required for us to be successful in the classroom.
Mhm.
And so
Yeah.
everything that you're talking about is really just understanding people,
Mhm.
right? And
Yes.
so I think it's as crucial to understand people and how to communicate with people as it is to know the technical side. So there's a lot to dive in here, and we'll have some background notes. We'll have some things that just pointers and discussion slides to go
Mhm.
through. But a lot of this is just going to be directed to each one of you individually in the audience. So if you have questions along the way, if you have any of these components that you struggle with, you just stop us. Just put it in the chat. Hey, I'd like to go a little bit deeper on this because that's really what we're here for. So where do we begin, right? How do we start learning how to understand people?
Well, for me, it was I was doing all the wrong things right as a 20 something.
Oh,
And so,
yeah.
that's kind of what got me there. So I
Right.
grew up, my story is I grew up in a two-car garage out west of Indianapolis.
Hmm.
It was before it was cool and they had the TV shows about it. It was just what we had.
Right.
But I always knew growing up there was something a little bit different about me because I wasn't really okay with that. I wanted more in life. And so when I got into the police department piece, I became very successful very young because I was driven and wanted to do the work. So
Yeah.
21 years old, I got onto the sheriff's department in reserve. At 23, 24 years old, I got onto the Indianapolis Police Department. A couple years into it, I got bored. I didn't have money at the time, but I had credit. So I started flipping houses using my credit, buying them, renting them, selling them. And then at 27, I bought a Subway restaurant because I
Oh.
made some money from there. And so I was constantly driven. And the other piece on that, about 27 years old, I also became a part of this elite narcotics unit. And we were the best of the best and we knew it all. And so I'm going through life at 27 thinking, hey, I grew up in a two-car garage. I've gotten this far. I've got life figured out. And you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go around and tell everybody else what they need to do to figure life out because they're not doing things about like I am, and I know it all. And what I didn't realize is how much people skills I was missing
Hmm.
until I started fracturing relationships with friends, with family. And it really hit home when it came to the point that my wife's parents didn't meet our children, or both of our daughters, until they were 4 and 8 years old,
Oh wow.
because we had got to the point that we couldn't effectively operate or communicate as a family,
Communicate. Yeah.
and we had to shut it down for 8 years. And so I had to take a deep look in the mirror and say, what part of this do I own? And, we call it soft skills, Clifton, but I tell everybody, this is the hardest work I've ever had to do in my life.
I agree. When I came from the field, I actually went right to Johnstone. I got recruited by Johnstone to do technical training, and it wasn't until I became a teacher of the technical side that I realized how bad of a technician I actually was. Right?
Yeah,
I think many of us educators can agree. It's not until we actually start studying and reflecting on what we do know
right.
that we start realizing the things we
We
don't
don't.
know.
Yeah.
And I think emotionally, and emotional intelligence is exactly kind of the direction that
Mhm.
we're going with this, is that we don't understand the things that we need to know until we start examining and evaluating. So yeah,
Sure.
I'm excited for this.
Yeah, and so that's kind of where the path led me. I stumble into this leadership training at the IMPD, and I start looking at some of these tools, and I start real using them, and I
Hmm.
start realizing something that I've learned in training I can actually use in life. And so I didn't actually start out using it at work, but at home. And so I had young kids. We were going through a rough time at home at the time. I didn't know it at the time, but my wife was suffering from postpartum depression,
Oh yeah.
and I didn't understand that. And I wasn't meeting her where she was at because I didn't know how to deal with it. And it got really rough. And so I took some of the material that's now in the program I call Foundations of Leadership, and start to share with everyone else. And I started using it. I started seeing that it works. And so then I really became hungry, almost addicted for more. And
Right.
so that helped me kind of set that 7 year path that I spent in the police academy, touring the country, uh, going to workshops and taking a piece of everything. And then one day I sat down after I left the academy because I wanted to really continue that work. I decided I was going to go back to school. I went to grad school and for executive leadership, and I started seeing all the application on the business side this could have that we had, because
Right.
a lot of things we had at the police department we would take from academia and the business world, and we would what I call operationalize that into policing or make it uh, applicable and usable for the officers.
Sure.
So some of that I went back and reverse engineering, but I started taking all these tools, and it just came to me one day, and I found a way that we could take a tool and build off of it, but take that tool with us to the next tool. And now we're going to learn this, and we're going to use this. And so we're doing what I call using them in concert, because I don't
Hmm.
think that there's any one tool out there that's a do all end all for everything. But
Yeah.
there's a lot of them that are a piece of the puzzle that if we can use them together, we can be very effective.
Yeah. Makes sense to me. Yeah, for sure.
So that's really how it came about. That's how I ended up at Johnstone. I came in as a consultant doing leadership development. The class is 5 days long. I split it in half. So I came and taught the first 2.5 days. I came back about a month later. We had some downtime for folks to kind of process and see if they can apply and do a little bit more pre-reading. Came back a couple months later, and they offered me a job to run training here. And so
Right.
that's where I've been for the last 3 years.
Bringing it to the industry, which is really
Mhm.
cool. So, those of you that missed us at the National HVACR Education Conference, or you missed Aaron's class, I encourage you to spend a little time diving into this side of our industry. We're starting to get a lot more demand for that, because as we start moving into more advanced technologies, as technology starts overcoming our lives, as the world starts having its own stresses, a lot of people are struggling with those communications, right?
Mhm.
Understanding
Yeah.
how to communicate and how to manage communication. As educators, I believe we're all going to start facing more of these struggles in the classroom. So instead of getting overcome by these challenges, if we start understanding how to work with them, we'll start being more successful in the classroom.
Yeah, and a lot of things that I've been able to find really ironically kind of bled over from the policing world. And so we have an apprenticeship program right now, which a lot of people have. We're
Yep.
working with this next generation of folks to use our trainers to help make them techs. And the biggest piece of feedback that I get from our customers that are interested in placing these apprentices, or we've got the technical side of things down, but if they can't walk into a house with, we'll say, Mrs. Smith, and understand that she's frustrated because she's hot or cold, and that she had to take the day off work to be here, and she's probably going to be out some money. And
Yep.
oh, by the way, there's a stranger in my house for the day, and I'm really not comfortable. So if you can't connect with Mrs. Smith from Go, and let her know I'm here to help. We're going to do the best job that we can. We're going to be as efficient and quick as we can, but get you taken care of for the best price, give you your options, and then get out of your hair. It can be a struggle, especially when folks are frustrated.
Yeah, and I think preparing our students for that, because that, I mean, you're going to encounter that. No matter where you are, whether you're in installation and sales, you're going to encounter these scenarios out in the field, and that whole communication really makes it, a necessity for preparing our students.
We're popping up here a little early, but I wanted
Sure.
to share a piece here, though. You brought up emotional intelligence earlier. And so this is kind of just what they call the 4 skills of that. One of the pieces that we really have to understand when others are being emotional, many times we get what I call hijacked and allow ourselves to get drug into that. We don't have to. And that's the great thing about it. And so if we have what is this awareness piece, and that's what I love about this when we talk about communication, when we talk about our own development or any challenge, building awareness really is the number one step.
Hmm.
But when we're dealing with folks that are emotional, many a times it's you cut me, I cut you, you cut me twice, and we kind of get that ring of fire circle. But what we don't realize is that they're not mad at us and they're not personalizing it at
Personally,
us. We feel like they are, but
right?
it's
We take it personally.
but they're mad at a situation. And whether it's in business or in government or in our industry, they're frustrated because they're hot or cold, they got to spend money, all these things. And so when we depersonalize that, and that's where the social awareness comes from, is that we have to be aware of our own emotions and make sure we're not getting sucked in, but we have to be aware that what they're frustrated about is not us, it's not us personally, but it's the situation they're in. And then we get down to this management piece. And so we keep our cool, that's self-management, and then we use our words to de-escalate, to connect with them, to get them to understand what's going on and how we're there to help. That's the relationship management piece. And so a lot of this stuff, Clifton, honestly, is very, very simple. And many times I'll finish a 5-day class and we'll talk and I'll say, I probably didn't tell you a lot of things you haven't heard already. It's how we take them and use them and apply them. Because if we can't apply the knowledge and the information, the books, I mean, I got a whole library, I'm in the front of the house here, but they're just paperweights and they're dust magnets if we can't take that information out and apply it in the real world.
Yeah. Well, I mean, just think about the classroom alone. We had a lot of new educators at the conference this year, and they're looking for these resources. Like, how do I work with people? Because you can imagine being a new educator sitting in a classroom, and it's the same kind of situation, right? It's not the technician out in the field working with the homeowner. It's the educator in the classroom. And all of a sudden I've got one student that is, for whatever reason, is being the I wouldn't say a problem, being the distractor of the conversation, right? But how do we manage that? Like as a technician, I may have learned how to work with customers, but is it the same process in the classroom when I'm working with students?
Yeah, it really is. And I'll forward here too and show you this next model. A couple down here. So really it's about open and honest conversations, right? And about expectations. And so a lot of times I say that in theory, this leadership development, which is really personal development, but leadership development and parenting in theory are exactly the same. We're taking people that we care about. We're trying to help them, trying to get them to grow and learn. Now, we're trying to share our failures with them, but if they're like my kids, they don't listen, at least to me. They listen to everybody else. They don't listen to me, and they got to go out and find on their own. But we want to have conversations with people, and we can do that in a way. A lot of people are very uncomfortable having direct conversations, whether that's, disciplining someone, whether that's an employee or a student or even a child, or even talking about a bump that we're having in the road or somewhere we've got a gap. But we can do that in a way. And many times if we practice it in the mirror and we give them what we want to get or what we feel like we need, then everyone can leave that conversation with their dignity, with respect intact. And we can do that in a very professional way. But really that's what it boils down to. We have to set those expectations. We have to communicate them to make sure everyone understands what they are. And we have to ensure that they can meet them. And then after that, we're handing the ball in someone else's court. If they can't meet the expectation, especially in an organization or even a classroom, if you set those and hold everyone accountable to that, many times they'll people that are come to you and they'll just say, hey, I can't meet your expectation. They'll self-select out.
That is intriguing because I've actually seen some very, very good class syllabuses that include like the emotional expectations.
Yeah.
What is the expectation of your responses in class if things get heated and I introduce this level of connection? This is going to be the requirement of you.
Yeah. Yeah, and so then you get rid of what, we like to call the hijackers, the people that are there to cause problems and distract everyone else from learning, and you can get down to business. We have hijackers in elementary schools, high schools. We have them in art classes. We have them everywhere in the workplace. We have them in government. They're just there. And so we can't ignore them or kick the can down the road. We just have to address them and move on.
And so are there any good skills for addressing that?
Absolutely. I'll bump down here. So we have this communication strategy. This is something that we came up with. We actually trained all of our people leaders last fall. So I traveled around all the regions here in the country. I think we had 5 different sessions. And basically, this was just a checklist for someone to go through and sit down and have a conversation if they didn't feel comfortable doing it. And what we did is we walked through the information, we gave descriptions and examples, and then we came up with real world Johnstone Supply type of situations, and we split them up in groups and said, take turns, one person being the manager, one person being the employee. And we give them forms, and this is one of them. We fill this out, and this is how we have a communication. And then we give them an expectation form too, where they can line out their notes and say, these are the things that I expect of you. Most people want to come to work, they want to come to class, they want to what have you, and do a good job for the most part.
Right.
That's generally the rule. We get the people that want to disrupt, and that's the exception. But many times they don't know what to do. And when folks don't know what to do, history tells us they do what they know how to do.
Sure.
It can be good, but many times it's not, because it's not what's called for. Now, everywhere in the world, I'm sure someone has had or worked for an organization where you have a supervisor that was a great X. And you can fill that in, and it can be an HVAC tech, it can be an electrician, It can be whatever, an accountant. And so someone somewhere up the food chain comes along and says, this person is a great X, they'll be a great X manager. But what we fail to do is realize those are 2 different skill sets, doing and directing, right? Yeah. The 2 Ds, and not director level, but just directing others to do it. And so if we don't train, if we don't coach, if we don't set expectations and follow up with them, and give them the resources to be successful, and they're not comfortable directing, what do? They fall right back into doing, which then we have a leadership gap in a group. Gaps get filled, just like the rain in the winter that falls in the road and freezes and cracks it. Somebody's going to step up. That might be good, that might be bad. Generally, it's the most dominant personality, but it's not how the system was designed, and therefore we many times end up in chaos.
That's crazy, because when we look at the number one reason that educators leave in their first year of teaching, it's because of what appears to them is not a good fit. It's typically a lack of communication. The expectations from the school is that they are hiring a teacher,
yes,
that has technical skills. And for most of us, we are technicians that don't always have the teaching skills. And so having that understanding that if we're a school hiring a teacher or educator, and it's not understood that I don't have the same teaching skills that many other educators have already acquired, this is something that we can address and get past.
Yeah. Yeah, really through just like a train the trainer type of model of those that do have that. Because as long as they're able to learn and adapt to that, now they have to have the personality type though, and that's a very important piece. So if you don't have that people side, if you're just an all task person, then you're going to want to do the task for everybody. And we get into the teach them to give them a fish or teach them to fish piece, right?
Yes.
And so we can't do that. And so that you have to have ingrained you as being, and that's why many times folks that I see that come through class that have that coaching background
Yeah.
excel and get it really quick. So I had to teach at kind of a mid speed because I've got folks that are really taking a deep dive and contemplating. Then I got fast movers, and I got to keep, everybody in generally a 20-person group engaged. And that's challenging as well. But many of people that struggle with that whole helping, and it's not really even a direction. I mean, that's a different skill set. It's mentoring, teaching, that coaching piece, because we have to make sure everybody's getting what they need to get them to success. So yeah, that's next level stuff as well. But that can all be done in a mentor role, in a train the trainer type of setup.
Yeah, exactly. So for any educators, especially for any young educators that are with us today or are watching this later in the finished video version, I encourage you that, if you get into that place where you feel like you're not meeting the expectations of the department, I encourage you to sit down and do the analysis. Determine where those gaps are and then find the resources. Like if we look back at the National HVACR Education Conference, that is the heart and soul of why we have it, is to have those resources, especially for young educators. I know myself, when I came to Johnstone to teach, man, I thought I was going to be a great teacher. And then I realized that I had a lot to learn about communicating to people. So they actually, once we learned that and we determined that I was a good bullshitter, but I wasn't a great teacher, right? Really,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
what it came down to.
Yeah.
So so Johnstone sent me to at that time is the ESCO conference, right? Didn't work for ESCO at the time. I was going to learn. So back in 2019, I went to the conference and I started learning the whole communication side. And I started learning that it was okay not to be a great presenter of the content.
Yeah.
And so we did an evaluation and I learned that I needed to be better at my presentation side of things. And so, if you get to that point where you think, man, maybe I'm not cut out to this, don't pick that up. Throw that to the side and go, what do I need to learn to get past this?
Yeah. And that's the thing. Yeah. See it as a challenge and say, okay, here's what I'm going to do. And I'm going to dive in and see where I can get better with that. And one of the things that I picked up over the last almost 15 years now in a classroom is that you got to be able to connect with your folks too. And the best way to do that, honestly, is just being a real person.
Yeah.
And I walk in and many times I open up my classes with a story about one of my failures.
That's a great point.
So because what that does, the very first thing I do is set the expectation and tell them what we're going to do and what we're not going to do. And I talk about, we're not going to role play. We're not going to do this. We're not going to do that. But here are the expectations. I'm going to share the last 15 years of my life with you, and I'm going to share where I fell short. And hopefully that'll help you not maybe go down those roads one day. But I expect you to participate. And we're going to have some conversations, and we're going to shut the door, and that stuff's going to stay in here. But if I can get people to think, I can get them to a really good level. But if I can get people to think and feel, they'll remember that material we're talking about when they're in the situation in the future, and they can use it because they'll go back there in their mind. Because we bookmark our feeling areas many times way more than we do our thinking areas.
That's so cool. So I was actually I was reading a book here recently about storytelling as an educator and the importance of sharing. And so I see where that comes into play, where you're making the emotional connection, not just that technical connection. And you got to be careful of the stories that you share.
Absolutely.
But
Yeah.
the ones that we do share that have the emotional connection, then the education starts getting more relevant. It's more connected because it is an emotional connection.
Yeah. And one of the things I start with too is we get rid of perfection first and foremost. Like it doesn't exist in the world. And if that's our bar that we're setting for ourselves or others, then we're setting other people up for failure and ourselves up to be frustrated. And then frustration really is what leads to that conflict. And so we have to be able to understand that we don't set ourselves up perfection, but we use excellence as the bar, because excellence in general means starting here and ending here, regardless of where here is on the scale. We can always work and get to excellence or be better, And so it's like we have to understand that, it's not a marathon, it's a sprint. And we have to take those little wins along the way. Or I'm sorry, it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. It's a long-term piece. It's lifelong learning. But we have to be able to take those those wins along the way. And if you interview people, and I've seen the studies about undergraduate education, the majority of people that don't finish is because it just seems like too big of a whale to eat, because they're trying to get from start to finish in one bite and not eat that whale one bite at a time. And so when we break it down and we see it like that, the people that generally have that type of mindset are more successful in those long-term ventures and complete them, because they understand it's just a journey. And so in the grand scheme of things, life's the same way. Our development's the same way. We have to be able to be successful in doing, taking those little pieces along the way.
Very cool. If Howard's still out there watching, I just heard it's going to have to be a new article. We're not HVAC perfection. We're HVAC excellence.
There you go. So talk a little bit, we just talked about this avoiding perfection and excellent piece, because it truly is an achievable alternative. But as then we get into really understanding the why, this is a piece that I came up with a few years ago, because I thought it was just a really simple way to understand our biology at a very, very high level, because we can't control it, but we can manage it. So you see, we call this piece our stoplight brain. And the brain, as we're wired, is very similar to a stoplight. And you can see it's a little bit out of order there from the stoplights, at least in our community anyway. But so how I describe this is that every sense that comes into the body comes in through the brainstem. And so when something starts to happen, the sense is coming in and we're starting to process it there. Now, much like a stoplight, when you're approaching and you see yellow, we know what we're supposed to do. Many times we do the opposite. We're supposed to slow down because we're getting ready to stop. And so we're stopped at the light and we have to wait until the light turns green, because if we don't, it's dangerous, right? We can pull out, we can get hit in a car accident, get hurt, maybe even fatally get injured, or get a ticket or what have you. It's dangerous. It's the same way with our emotions. We get emotionally hijacked in this red area because we can't control it. But this is where our emotions travel across the brain in this red brain, what I call, or the limbic area, because we have to get to that frontal lobe to get to our rationale, our reasoning, our logic. And that takes time to do. And so the path of this really just depends on the person. It depends on the situation, how volatile or how much buildup there's been to the situation. But if you've ever heard the term, and I know you have, Clifton, go type that email tonight, sleep on it, don't hit send, get up in the morning and go read it. That's because in the morning, time has dissipated all that stress hormone that traps us there in that red area. And now we're thinking clearly. And so much more has become clear to us overnight. And it's really not that big of a deal anymore. What's a big deal when we're stuck in red brain is not a big deal when we let it get through. So a couple other things other than time are, people say, go take a breath. We don't tell people why. The oxygen is one of the things that helps dissipate that. And exercise triggers positive brain chemistry that also dissipates that. So when we're in that red brain piece, we're emotionally hijacked. All that is a stress hormone kind of taking over the body for us. And so if you see there, we can breathe, we can exercise, we can give it time. And that's when we get into that front brain. So now we're in green light and we can proceed safely. Now, many times you got to still look right before going, because we can only control what we control, and that's ourselves and our own driving, not the other drivers. So this is a piece I like to use because it's really simple. And adults learn through repetition, as we know when we're training folks, but we also learn through visual pieces as well. And so when we have something that we can relate to that's very simple, then we're more likely to go back and use that the next time we get into quote unquote red brain.
Man, I am seeing a poster right here, right? Like sitting in the classroom, right? And
Yeah.
that conflict comes up. Like we just
Mhm.
talk about something, right? I just introduced an electronic expansion valve, and the one student stands up. Wait a minute, this doesn't make sense. And I go, wait a minute, I just give this information to you. It's still in the yellow side of your brain. Are you in the green brain yet?
Yeah.
I mean, just that visual for
Mhm.
students is so important. I everything that I do, like every content that I create, my goal is to take something difficult and rewrite it with crayons. And
Yep.
so I'm
That's
seeing my
exactly what
crayon
you see
brain.
here.
Yeah, I mean, this makes sense to me.
It's
So
crayons, yeah. And so, yeah, it is so simple, but that's the thing. The more something is simple, the more that we can refer to it or remember it, keep it in the front of our mind, we're going to use it. Now,
right,
I've gotten to the point after so many years now when I know that I'm there because I'm OCD and everything happens in threes. In my mind, that conversation's red brain, red brain, red brain.
right.
Okay, got to take a breath, got to back up, got to settle down. And that's what I try to get everybody to understand. Even after 15 years of teaching this stuff, I still mess it up all the time. And I'm going to, that's the expectation because I'm human.
Right.
But what I have now at, say, 48 that I don't have, or I didn't have, sorry, at 28
Mhm.
is I care, number one, and I have the tools and I have the experience and the reps on them. And I'm dedicated to if I get outside of the cones, I have that self awareness from emotional intelligence. I can identify that and I can navigate myself back in. I can take accountability. I can say, I'm sorry. Uh, I can and let someone know. And here's what I'm going to do to try and make sure this doesn't happen again. And that's really all people care about. When you do that, that's what I call removing the need for blame. You already mitigate a potential conflict because there's no need for that person to be frustrated or blame you anymore. You've taken accountability, you've offered an apology, and you've given them a solution. That's something I learned very young as a young husband when I got the wrong box of crackers one time at the store, and it turned into a big piece in my kitchen. And I said, you know what? I'm sorry. If it's that big of a deal, there's a grocery store right down the road. I'll go back and get another piece. And yes, it's my fault. I didn't know what type of crackers to get. Now, I know some other people that have a similar situation with bologna, where their wife threw the bologna at them, smacked them in the face, and they doubled down on the thick bologna. But my incident lasted 2 minutes. Theirs was 2 weeks. They slept in the barn.
Yeah, that's a red brain versus green brain right there.
Cutting out the middleman.
Gosh, I love this.
I mean, when it comes to conflict, generally,
Yeah.
especially with our spouses, our partners, generally we're going to work it out and we're going to be fine. So why have all the headache, the stress, and the middle part when we can just control what we can control, take accountability for what part of this we own. We own a portion of every situation we're in, regardless of what the percentage of it is. We're involved in it. We've done something or didn't do something. And when we start thinking about others and we can stop thinking about ourselves, that's where we start getting to those extra high levels of performance.
Man, I am really seeing a poster in this.
Well, maybe we can add your face to the front of it with your tongue.
So I
Or
hope
you
this is
can get this as a hat for your next costume, because I know you collect those.
oh my gosh. All right, I'm taking notes while you're moving on here. Hold on now.
So this is
Okay.
a piece that about I spent 8 years as well on the council here in Avon, Indiana, a small
Mhm.
suburb of West Indianapolis where I live. People told me I was crazy at the time, but I was one of those guys that saw a need, felt like I had a skill set to help, was able to win 2 elections. I'm really not sure how. I was the worst politician in the world because I'm just truthful and honest and transparent. But it ended up working out for me. But one of the things that I used to learn in dealing with folks is that we would not give away, but we would grant money to different organizations in the community for the work they were doing.
Yeah.
And many times they would come in and ask, or we'd have conversations with people. And if I had information that I felt like maybe someone was trying to pull a fast one on me, and I accused them of that, and I was wrong because we don't always have all the information, then that could start a conflict. So
Yeah.
one of the things I started working through and trying, because I was really good at asking questions. I was a detective for years. I'd interviewed people for years, so I was good at this question asking piece. So I came up with this, help me understand. And I started using it, and it started working. And it really was one of those like snowball things. And I started implementing it everywhere. And so when you get into any type of situation where maybe there's some frustration, and when we absolutely want to avoid a conflict, utilizing those 3 words, help me understand, when you're asking a question, and not, well, you did this, or I saw this, or blah, 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 and going at someone or being accusatory. Because when we're asking a question, we're making it about us. I don't know, but I need you to help me. When we're making an accusation, that's about someone else. So we know what the cat does in the corner of the room, right? Even as friendly as it may be, when the cat or the dog or what have you, the animal's put in the corner of the room, it strikes back. And so we as humans are the same way. When we get accused of something, especially if the information's not right or we didn't do it at all, then we go into red brain. But one of the things I've noticed that helps keep others out of red brain is asking the question and making it more about me and my need to be educated and not an issue with them.
Melanie and I took a class about 2 years ago on understanding borderline personality disorder
Mm.
to help communicate and understand better with a member of our family.
Mhm.
And in that training, this was actually one of the most important topics for de escalating someone that is flooded. Right. We
Mhm.
all know what that flooded emotional feeling is
Yeah.
when you have and it doesn't have to be something you don't understand. I mean, it could just be a variety of inputs in the atmosphere that you're in to the point where you're emotionally flooded.
Mhm.
And outburst is a very common side effect of being emotionally flooded.
Yeah.
And a very, very easy way for de-escalation of those situations is these 3 words.
Mhm.
Help me understand. Because many times people are acting out, especially young students are acting out because they feel like they're not being heard.
Mhm.
They're feeling like they're not being understood. And it may be just a reaction of them not understanding completely,
Mhm.
but they're trying to reach out and they just don't understand how to yet. And so
Mhm.
those 3 words, as an educator, if we can use those 3 words in that moment, help me understand,
Mhm.
it's almost an immediate cry for that de-escalation from the person that is flooded.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's great stuff.
Well, many times, and when we just like people, I've got a piece in here called the iceberg theory. So I'm not going to shuffle back through because I'm not sure exactly which one it's on. But the iceberg theory basically is the under the surface things that we all carry around. And so we know the iceberg is very powerful. It's powerful enough to sink the Titanic. What we don't always know is that we know what we're carrying around, what our issues are, what our stressors are. Someone's sick, we have financial problems, maybe we're afraid we're going to lose our relationship, or what have you. I mean, everybody's walking through something, but reactions and that whole emotional hijack, we don't know what's triggering that for other people until we ask. And so if it's our students, if it's our family, if it's our employees or our staff, many times when people are struggling, they'll tell you, but you have to what? Ask.
You have to
Number
ask.
one. And when we do that in a way that's non-confrontational, that's non-threatening, and that's not about them at all, it's about us. Hey, we were walking down the hallway the other day, and you bumped into me, and you kept walking, you didn't say anything. That's really out of character for you, and I didn't really know what was going on. Help me understand what happened there. I mean, is there something going on that I can help you with? Or is there something that you need to talk about? And maybe they won't, but you know what? They will walk away remembering that you offered that and you cared enough to take a minute out of your day. And sometimes it's a simple text too. Hey, how are things going? Thanks, I appreciate it. No one's really asking, because in our own minds we have these expectations. We're going to go back to expectations here. See kind of how this stuff ends up tying in together. We go back to expectations. We have these expectations of perfection to a certain degree from everybody else, but when we fall short, we generally our expectations everybody else to be understanding, but we're not understanding when others fall short. And so we have to remember that too, because that is something that's under our control. And the more relationship capital that we can build with other people, it starts with that trust piece. And I can tell you right now from experience from over the years and just being an old guy, you'll build better relationships with folks by just slowing down sometimes. And trust me, I'm a fast mover, and many of us are, and we got things to do. But many times we got to slow down to speed up. And sometimes if we slow down and have those conversations to better understand other people, then we can go and solve the problem that actually exists. Because as humans, we're generally ready to jump right in and solve the problem that we think exists, but we're spinning our wheels and we might be doing damage if we don't know what problem is really there and we're solving something that we don't have.
Well, you think about that outburst in class, that
Mhm.
student that has that emotional outburst. Instinctively, as educators, we may want to solve the problem because we care
Mhm.
about people. We are very much mentors. And so
Yes.
the questions that we present may be doing harm to the situation.
Yeah.
If my question, like Aaron, if you're frustrated and you're not understanding this and you're acting up in class and I go, "What's wrong with you?"
Mm-hmm.
It's not going to help the situation
With
because
you,
you
right?
may.
On
But
them.
if I turn that around and go, will you help me understand what's bothering you? It's just a couple different words
Mhm.
that could change the outcome of the situation. Instead of trying to solve what's wrong with them, first try to understand it.
Yeah. And I can even apply this going all the way back to failing my first digital principles class. I was going at 150 miles an hour, something I thought I understood. And so, because that's how I knew how to do it. But it was different work than reading the textbooks in government and psychology, understanding, comprehending that, and regurgitating that on the test. So,
Mm,
one of the things too that really ties this whole thing together is understanding at a deep level what is conflict. So, we
right.
talk about mitigating it and de escalating it. What truly is conflict? And so, I'm going to pull this up here and show you. We've got a little model that we created several years ago. And this is something that's been anecdotally tested hundreds of times from not only my own experiences, but the many people that have come through class over the years. And I've yet to find a situation this doesn't apply. And it's that conflict comes from frustrations that manifest because of unfulfilled expectations. Now,
Dang.
there's a reason we work this backwards. We all walk around, see, we're tying these expectations in again. We all walk around every day with expectations. Some of them are direct and some of them are indirect. Some of them are, hey, I hope it doesn't rain this weekend. I've got a big X plan, right? That's kind of direct. That's in the front of our mind. We're thinking about it. We're really, really planning or concerned about it. Sometimes you might come home and realize the dog ate your couch. Now, unless this has happened before, it's probably not on your mind, but man, you weren't expecting it. Now you're frustrated, and we can get in conflict with our dogs or people too. And so we walk it backwards. We work it backwards because if we have a conflict, we know that it came because some or both parties got frustrated. And then we need to figure out what those expectations were because we go back to that expectation management piece. But we don't go forward because just because there's unfulfilled expectations doesn't mean we have to get frustrated. But if we do, it doesn't mean we have to have conflict because remember, going back to emotional intelligence, we have that awareness and management. And so if we're aware of our own emotions and we're aware of what's going on and our own frustration, and we know why, what expectation is unfulfilled and why it caused frustration, then we got that management piece. And we do this in class by going back and taking previous conflicts, breaking them down, walking through them, and utilizing them as our case study because we can learn from that. Now that we have the tools, what could we have done differently, or what can we do differently in the future to ensure we have a more effective outcome when we get into this? Because this should apply to almost every time some type of volatile situation arises.
Yeah, I think back to that, well-designed class syllabus and those class rules and class
Mhm.
expectations. If those are clearly defined and then those are clearly displayed in the classroom, and so that people have a better understanding of expectations,
Mhm.
has that potential for eliminating some of that frustration and potentially eliminating any conflict.
And again, we don't have to get there. So I'll give you an example again of our apprenticeship program.
Mm-hmm.
Day one, I would walk in there and I would tell them all, I need 3 things from you. I need you to show up to work. I need you to show up to work on time. I need you to work hard. If you do those 3 things, we have the resources, we have the manpower, the brain power, the tools, the books, the curriculum. We will get you to where you need to be. So those are my expectations from them. So if they don't fulfill those expectations, I made them very clear. And the instructors then go back and reiterate them. There's no need for me to get frustrated because I communicated to them. The ball's now in their court. If they don't meet the expectations, then that's on them because they know what they are. We've communicated them. We've given them the tools. And so we had one individual who was really struggling. And out of a 14-day class, because we run our program 14 weeks, 28 days, 2 days a week, 14 weeks. And then they work in our warehouses the other 3 days a week. So we get them some work experience, life experience, industry experience. And they get to talk to the contractors that come in and kind of, network with them.
Introduce network. Yeah.
And so this individual decided one night he was going to go out and karaoke. He called in the next day, told us it was something else, but he had told his classmates, yeah, I'm going to karaoke tonight. And so we called him in the next day and said, hey, we're here to help you, but we can't care more about your career than you do. So unfortunately, since karaoke is more important and you didn't come to work on time, work hard, we're going to let you go. And there's no frustration on our part, right?
Everybody understood.
Expectation. There's no conflict. He might be frustrated because he thinks we should give him another chance, but that's the thing. And so whether it's in the classroom, whether it's in the staff or even at home, generally I've always found that this model will work over time. But if we utilize those expectations and even put them on paper, and we do that a lot of times. So I'm going to operations now. I've been moved from talent development over to operations. One of the first things I'm going to start doing with this group is just setting my expectations in general. Put them on paper, give them to them and say, hey, this is not a write-up. You're not in trouble. There's nothing here that's about you. These are the things that I feel like to be effective so I can meet your expectations and we can meet those of the organization and the team we need to be focused on. And if you do these things and you communicate with me and let me know when you need help, we'll get it for you. But we can't solve problems that we either don't know exist or we won't allow to exist. And so if we don't have that information, it's pretty tough to do that.
Seems pretty simple, actually.
It's very simple. The complexity is keeping it in the front of our mind. And when we get emotionally hijacked, working our way out of it to use the tools. And I still mess it up today. Again, I messed it up this week. And so, but we have to understand that it's not a failure, right? First attempt at learning, we're going to take that and we're going to move on to the next one because the failures are the ones that burn. Those are the ones that we remember. So those are the ones we learn from and take with us so we don't do them again. After a while, the wins, we just, we collect those and those just kind of line up on a board. But
I love that analogy of tools. As educators, we all understand tools. Like we know what tools we're supposed to use. Sometimes we use them inappropriately and there's consequences. I can use an adjustable wrench for a hammer, but eventually it's not going to function properly.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And so when we start talking about our professional tools, it's really a matter of, realizing that it is a tool that has to be treated as such, has to be maintained, has to be cleaned, oiled, perfected, used often, properly, and the outcome is benefits for the whole classroom.
Sure. Yeah. Well, and it's a functional environment, because if we work this all the way up and conflict goes on, it's ongoing and unresolved, then we end up in a toxic environment. And nobody wants that. And a lot of people have been there or seen that or had, a toxic individual they've dealt with. And generally, it's hard to use any tools to fix that. If we get to that threshold, many times it probably was just an issue to where we had a selection problem to begin with, and we kind of need to replace and move on. But the 3 areas that I found over time, if we have performance issues, it's generally a training issue, a supervisory issue, or a selection issue. And if we know we're training someone, whether that's in the classroom and the boardroom, to do the job they need to do, we're giving them the right level of supervision, not over or under supervising people. We can't supervise a brand new person to a 20-year seasoned veteran the same way. It won't work. If we do that correctly and they can't make it work, then it was just a selection issue, like for me being a robot engineer. Now, I would love to have those checks these days when I look at, you can spend $25,000 and buy a Tesla robot that'll do your laundry. But at the end of the day, that wasn't for me. I was miserable doing that, and I was setting myself up to fail. But I didn't know that back then, but I do know that now. And so I have a 16-year-old who's got a couple years left in high school that I'm trying to help understand these things so she can set herself up for better success moving forward.
Aaron, I have a feeling this is probably a question that you could answer.
Okay.
And Osvaldo, I'm so grateful that you joined us. Osvaldo is from Belize, has been joining us every week. He's
Awesome.
just a hungry technician that is trying to be better in technical skills. He's here learning these emotional development skills as well. So let's think about this for our young technicians and even students that'll be joining, right? And I completely get this. I can remember being a young, hungry technician and people not taking me as seriously, especially, I started my career right in refrigeration. So I was doing refrigeration as well as HVAC, and, early 20s coming to, say a school and going, hey, I'm gonna have to go up on the roof and take a look at this refrigeration system. They're going, you look like you just came out of the school.
Yeah.
Are you capable to work here? So how can young technicians approach those types of situations? Have you got any thoughts on that?
Yeah. Well, first we have to do, as instructors, we got to see them as people,
You're
right? First and foremost. And because if we don't see them as people, we're seeing them either as objects, which are vehicles, obstacles, or irrelevance. And so that's the Arbinger Institute's work. That's the outward mindset. If we're seeing them as people, they're just like us. And we're going to understand that they're going to struggle. They're not going to get it right all the time. We want to help them get there because they're a person to us. But if we see them as objects, we see them as an obstacle that's taking up all our time and we can't use it for anyone else. They're a vehicle. Or maybe we're going to look good if they get a great grade, and they're helping us, or we just don't care about them at all and they're irrelevant. So that's what I would say. The first step is we need to make sure that the instructors are seeing. I think most of them do. I mean, most of them that I've met, anyone who's in education is there to be a coach. And generally they're not self-serving. And so there's going to be exceptions to every rule, but for the most part, we need to make sure that if we're seeing those folks as people, and that's the mindset we have in going at them, that we want to set them up to be successful. Again, we got to work with them. We got to set the expectations and make sure they're going to hold up to their bargain, right? Show up on time and work hard. But at the end of the day, that's when we're going to build trust with them. They're going to start relating to us because we're going to show them we're a real person. We're going to talk about our failures, because when we do that, then we get rid of that expectation of perfection and the room comes down and everyone's like, all right, I got this now. I'm not so worried about being perfect or not looking dumb in front of other people that I can focus on what I'm doing.
So even as a technician, I can apply that directly to a customer by creating that personal connection, that emotional connection. I've got the technical. I already have that. They're just not comfortable with my delivery because maybe I haven't made that personal connection yet, that emotional communication. So it's an opportunity to create a closer connection to that person, diving deeper. If that person, if we look back at the same 3 words, if the customer is not accepting that you're giving the right information, a question could be, help me understand. Help me understand how you are perceiving this information. Is there anything that I can help answer for you?
Mrs. Smith, right?
Mm-hmm.
Here's what I'm going to do for you. Here's what I'm here to help with. So now I just need some time to do that. If you can be patient with me, I'll do the best I can to get you back up and running for the least amount possible and on the road. Now, you may need some upgrades, and I'm going to make you aware of them, but that's up to you to choose if you want them. But yeah, if we're seeing other people as people, in general, we generally get back what we give. So if we're seeing other people's people and they know that and they pick up on that, we're going to be good. If we're treating them as objects, we'll probably get that in return.
Yeah. So if I'm a technician and I'm only giving technical advice, that's how I'm going to be perceived.
Yeah. They're going to think you're a robot and you don't understand their situation because they don't know what you're saying, right? They have no idea. And the other thing too, and I've seen this a lot with doctors. I'll go to a doctor's office because I have a problem that I'm not qualified to fix, and I'm asking them for help. And many times, not always, some of them are very, very good, but I've had some that I've actually got up and left because they'll just talk down to you like you're an idiot because you're not using the proper terminology, you're not walking through the proper process. And so one time I asked him, I said, if I knew how to fix this, what do you think I would need you for? And he just kind of looked at me. And I started, at the time I was a narcotics executive, I started talking about my wheelhouse. I'm like, do you know how to write a search warrant for drugs? You know how to do this? You know how to do that? And he just looked at me and shook his head. And I said, and I wouldn't expect you to. If you have a drug house in your neighborhood, you pick up the phone, you call the police, that complaint goes to us and we take care of it. So.
Very intriguing. All goes back to teaching people in a technical world. We're here to help understand the communication side of what we do. We can be the most intelligent technicians, but if we're not communicating to people with people's skills, we're probably not going to be able to pass the information on properly.
Or maintain those customers, right? And that's a big part of building a business, is that book of business and continuous people calling you back.
Absolutely. Aaron, I'm so grateful you joined us today. That is just so much deep information. I got a feeling we'll probably have some things that we'll follow up on. So I'll guarantee we're going to have some requests from the audience to dive, deeper into some topics or other areas. So if there's things that you would like to learn more about from Aaron, let us know. Also want you to, connect with Aaron, learn a little bit more about what he's doing, not just at Johnstone, but through the foundations of leadership, right? He's working with the industry as a whole, just people, not even the industry, just community as a whole to become better at understanding those tools that we need and providing that education. So yeah, thank you so much for joining us today, Aaron.
Yeah, absolutely. It's my pleasure. I appreciate it.
All right. Well, if there's no questions out there, I think we're going to wrap things up for the day. We're grateful that we spent time together, and next week we're going to be broadcasting from a very special location. We're going to be doing some on-site videos at a lab and manufacturing and testing facility, and so we're going to do some reporting on what that is. I don't know if we're going to be actually at the facility, if it's going to be off grounds, but we'll do some recapping from one of our manufacturers next week. So once again, if there's any topics that you would like for us to do, or if you just want to let us know how good or bad these conversations are, I want to know what you're thinking, because we care about you, we care about our community, and together we're just going to continue growing and developing. And with educators like Aaron that's bringing these soft skills and communication skills that we all need, we're just going to be better together. All right. Well, yeah, Tom, thank you so much for joining us today. All right. Well, everyone have a wonderful week. Aaron, you have a great evening, and we'll see you all next week on Did You Know, the ESCO HVAC show. Bye, everybody.